Hey everyone, it's William here. This is the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series. Our theme today is the good news. Yesterday we had the bad news. Dmitri was trying to put together from all the sources that he had a truthful idea, an accurate idea of what was going on in Russia. Yesterday he gave us the worst possibility from what he'd heard, and today he's giving us the best possibility. And of course, we have the luxury of knowing which of those was actually true. Okay, so did I say? I did say, didn't I? Boy, I can't remember what I said 2 sentences ago. This is, of course, the Grand Duke Dmitri 1917 diary entry. We're doing the long diary entry of 7th November 1917. That's old style on the Julian calendar. It was a Tuesday. And yeah, so the bad news that Dmitri had reported on the day before was that the Bolshevik takeover had been completed, that that was done. Prior to the Civil War, the Bolsheviks were in charge of both capitals and the army. Okay. That there was bloody fighting in both capitals. And also Dmitri noted the platform that the Bolsheviks had taken power on, basically peace at all costs, all land to the peasants, and that all non-Russian ethnic regions of the former Russian Empire would be allowed their independence. Okay, so, that's a whole other subject as to whether those things were followed through with. Anyway, today, Dmitri is giving us the opposite view and explaining why that could be plausible. So here we go. There are symptoms that something has happened in Petrograd or in Russia in general, and that something is good, because in London trading, the value of the ruble has risen 15 points, and that's a reliable indicator. But the main thing is what the English Colonel Rawlinson related yesterday after returning from Baratov. Apparently, a telegram from Stavka was received there on Friday saying that the uprising of the Maximalists had been definitively suppressed and that it seemed as though there was no fighting in Moscow, that order has been restored everywhere, and that power is in the hands of Generals Kornilov and Kaledin, and Kerensky is in hiding. Rawlinson said that this was an official telegram and that it seems as though there can be no doubt that it is true, and that the telegrams from Petrograd cannot be believed. If only that is so, then one absolutely must pray to God, because then a new phase of this drama has begun, in this nightmare that Russia has been living through. This information coincides with the unexpected surge of the ruble exchange rate in London. Then, yesterday evening, Etter received a telegram from blank in Kazvin. It says that information was received there from Russia, though as yet not confirmed, that a new cabinet has been established in Moscow with Savinkov as the chairman and Generals Kornilov, Kaledin, Ruski, Brusilov, Alexeyev, and Admiral Kolchak. In other words, power has passed into the hands of the military leaders, ! But it still has not been officially confirmed. One thought is still a little frightening, to wit, that while a cabinet has been established in Moscow, the uprising continues in Petrograd. All right, so the sources are so interesting in all of this. So the source for the bad news is Reuters. The Reuters, wire service reports came over the wire service. The last one that Dmitri had seen was from 4 days before, the 3rd of November, and the Reuters reporting was accurate. So the reason that Dmitri was skeptical was both because that wasn't what he wanted to hear, and because the Bolsheviks controlled the means of communication in Russia. So if you were sending a wire, Reuters were sending wires out from Russia, then, they could be interfered with. anyway, and you know, and the reporters, the press representatives would have been given reports from the Bolsheviks who were in charge. So, you know, that was a good reason to be skeptical. But as it turns out, from our vantage point, we know that the Reuters reporting was accurate. Okay, so what are the sources this time? Well, this is a military source, and this is fascinating because it all seems to center on the Russian troops, the Caucasian Corps based in Kazvin, which was where Dmitri had originally been sent when he was exiled from Russia. Sorry, there's a TV on in the background. So I hope that doesn't interfere. I'll try to talk over it. So the good news is coming from this military source. And so an English Colonel Rawlinson, I don't know any more about him. There were other Rawlinsons. There was a famous Rawlinson who was an Orientalist. There was a Rawlinson who was, I don't know his rank, Colonel General something in the First World War, who would be at Arkhangelsk with the British attempt to intervene there. This was a different Rawlinson, a colonel, maybe some kind of military attaché. He had been in Kazvin and seen Baratov, General Baratov, who was in charge there. Baratov had allegedly received a telegram from Stavka, the Russian headquarters, and it was an official telegram. And it said that the Bolshevik uprising had been definitively suppressed. So, wow, great. And that the generals, Kornilov and Kaledin, had taken over. So the Kornilov uprising back in September had been suppressed, but here we go. Kornilov's back, and he's in power along with Kaledin. So this reminds me, you know, so Dmitri says this is an official telegram. So it has to be true. There can be no doubt that it is true. It reminds me, I just recently watched the movie September 5th about the terrorist attack at the 1972 Olympic Games in Munich. And the movie is from the perspective of the television news reporters. And they also get an official telegram saying that all the hostages have been rescued, all the terrorists are dead, and they go on the air with that. Not everybody thinks they should, but they decided to go ahead and go on the air with that, and then it turned out that the official telegram was rubbish. It was wishful thinking. All the terrorists, many of the terrorists were killed, all the hostages were killed. And so then they had to go back on television and recant that. Anyway, this was, an official telegram, allegedly, if Rawlinson had his information correct. And then there's this other source, that Etter, who was the Russian minister to Tehran, Marling's counterpart, who had received a telegram from Kazvin. So Kazvin is the source of all of this misinformation, saying that a Moscow cabinet had indeed been formed with Savinkov at its head, and all of these generals, most of whom had been involved in Nicholas's abdication, well, Alexeyev and Ruski, I believe, I shouldn't say most of them, were now in charge in Moscow. There may be some fighting going on in Petrograd, but everything's fine in Moscow. And, you know, I'm always amazed at the irony of Dmitri saying joyfully that Savinkov is in charge, because Savinkov was not only the ringleader in the successful assassination of Grand Duke Sergei, Dmitri's uncle, but he was also expressed great disappointment that the terrorist Kalyaev, who was sent in 1905 outside of the gates of the Kremlin Palace to throw a bomb at Grand Duke Sergei's carriage in the first attempt, had not gone through with it. And the reason Kalyaev hadn't gone through with it is because he saw that the children, Dmitri and Maria, were in the carriage, and he couldn't go through with it. He couldn't blow up the kids along with their uncle. Savinkov was upset about that. he was, mad at the guy. No, you should have thrown the kids are collateral damage. Anyway, Dmitri's delighted to think that Savinkov is now in charge with all these generals. Okay, so that's kind of an interesting side note, but I'm really fascinated by these, conflicting, I should say, sources of information and where they come from. In this instance, the military information was not, that was filtering into the Caucasian front, the Persian front, was not accurate, but the news reporting, the Reuters, was accurate. Okay, so now we come to this theory of Dmitri's that the ruble has risen 15 points on the foreign exchange trading in London, and that clinches it, that the ruble could not possibly have risen 15 points if things were going badly in Russia. Well, I don't know anything about such things, so that was something that I thought I could fruitfully turn to AI to ask about. And so I'll just read you what I've got from Perplexity. The ruble did not experience any sustained or meaningful surge in late October, early November 1917. By then, it had undergone a catastrophic wartime depreciation, and foreign markets had almost completely lost confidence in Russian paper. Foreign observers already spoke of the ruble as a failed bellwether, so Dmitri's faith in a 15-point rise in London as a reliable indicator of good news in Petrograd was misplaced. So wartime collapse of the ruble. Before the war, the gold-backed ruble was one of the more stable European currencies, trading close to a fixed parity against sterling and other gold standard monies. Suspension of gold convertibility in 1914, massive deficit finance, and accelerating inflation meant that by 1917, the internal price level was roughly 6 times that of 1913, and the ruble's external value had fallen dramatically. So that's the situation during the war. Then, starting in 1917, with the ruble sterling rate, a study of Russian exchange on London notes that the rate moved from roughly 9.5 to 9.6 rubles per pound sterling pre-war to about 17 rubles per pound as confidence in the Tsarist and then provisional government's credit collapsed, a near halving of the ruble's external value. By late 1917, the London market treated Russian paper as highly speculative, with thin, nervous trading rather than a deep market whose day-to-day movements reliably track political realities in Petrograd or Moscow. Could there have been a brief upsurge in a market as illiquid and jittery as Russian exchange in London by autumn 1970? It is entirely plausible that rumors of a strong anti-Bolshevik government or reports that maximalist uprisings were suppressed could produce a sharp but short-lived rally in the ruble, quote, on the order of several points in a day. Such blips reflected traders' hopes that foreign bond coupons might yet be honored or that some recognizable authority would stabilize the situation, not any real improvement in Russia's economic fundamentals. Very soon thereafter, repudiation of Tsarist and provisional government debts and hyperinflation rendered the ruble essentially worthless in foreign eyes. Okay, so that's, he was wrong. The financial information he was getting wasn't good. I don't know if he was looking at actual market reporting. It seems like not. So if on a particular day when he looked, the ruble had suddenly jumped up, it was a short-lived thing. And he didn't bother to recheck, or what is more likely, that he was getting this news from other people saying, oh, hey, have you seen the ruble is up? And that means that, contrary to the Reuters reporting, everything must be fine in Russia. Anyway, fascinating stuff. And what do we have next time? Well, we have sort of a turn toward the personal, what's going on with Papa and Laming, and some actual news of Maria. So, yeah, come back. All fascinating stuff, and I'll see you then. Bye.